Cue all the hysteria out there now over how if Trump doesn't just hand over the keys to the White House tomorrow, we're all going to die of COVID because of the delay. Oh my gosh, right? I mean, what they've used COVID for so many things. Why not have this be the secret to convincing everybody that Trump's delay is costing lives? His delay in conceding. That's really what this is all about. You're hearing a lot of this now. Joe Biden's out there. He's giving his team's talking points, and then the media will reflect those talking points back to him with questions that are effectively, given everything that you've said is true, how awful is Trump really, and what should we do to continue to talk about his awfulness in the press? But first, let's start with what Joe's contention is here. Here's Joe Biden. Joe Biden, no joke. No joke. Period. I mean, I'm just here saying stuff that people tell me to say, and I've been doing it for 40 years. Play clip 1.
It's great news that Moderna and Pfizer have each come up with vaccines that are in excess of 90% effectiveness. And getting the vaccine and a vaccination, though, are two different things. Everyone on our call today and our Zoom today agreed that the sooner we have access to the administration's distribution plan, the sooner this transition would be smoothly moved forward. And, as we battle COVID, we also make sure the business and workers have the tools, the resources, the national guidance, and health and safety standards to operate safely. And we can do that. We can bring Democrats and Republicans together, work with business and labor to deliver those necessary resources. And for millions of Americans who've lost hours and wages or have lost their jobs, we all agreed on our call that we can deliver immediate relief.
You know what would help in delivering immediate relief? If Nancy Pelosi stopped holding relief hostage to her outlandish demands to bail out cities that were running up huge debts even before the COVID crisis. But he's not going to talk about that. No, instead, what you'll get from Joe Biden is, we just want to know what their vaccine rollout plan is, man. We just want to know what's going on with that. One issue with it. We all understand what that would turn into, right? They're saying they want to know the vaccine rollout plan so that there can be a smoother transition. And keep in mind that Trump hasn't even accepted that there is necessarily, there could be, but a transition coming. And that's the part of this that that's not going to shift. That's not going to change. But what we all know they would do, the moment that the Trump team told them what the transition plan and what the vaccine plans are, they would start criticizing it publicly, trashing it. Oh my gosh, Trump is just putting forward this vaccine distribution plan that privileges, white cisgender patriarchy or something. There would be some, oh my gosh, it's only, the vaccine's only for the rich. What? It's going to nursing homes and healthcare providers. Oh, whatever it may be, right? That's what they're going to tell us. So it just opens up all kinds of criticism. They got plenty of time. Remember, they're going to be handed a plan, if there is a transition, of what the vaccine is supposed to be. But really, this is all them saying, this is all the storyline of, we would do a better job, and any problems in the vaccine distribution that do come up, if there's a Biden presidency, will immediately be blamed upon Trump and his unwillingness to pass the plans to them now so they can come up with their fixes to the plan, even though there's zero reason to believe that Joe Biden and the clowns that he is filling in slots around him already would be better at this. No reason to believe it whatsoever. Who just created the public-private partnership to get us to this stage? Who created that? That's right. It was the Trump administration, right? It was President Trump that came up with this Operation Warp Speed with his advisors, I understand, marshaling the experience and the knowledge of experts around him. But they were able to do that, and you'll notice they get no benefit as a result. There's no willingness to say, wow, good job, Trump and team. You guys probably know what you're doing. Let us know about this vaccine plan when you can, because we want to make sure we do a great job of implementing it when Joe Biden takes over. I'm talking about from the perspective of the Biden team. That would be a reasonable position. No, their position is, this is an outrage. He's not conceding. He's not giving us what we need. He's not doing what we tell him to do. It's terrible. It's awful. And the media is, of course, playing along with the whole thing. Here's a NBC News reporter this is a great question, because this is a reminder. You could call this, the Obama administration era of journalism questions, right? This is the kind of stuff you'd see when they'd ask Obama, sir, I know this is going to be a tough one, but what's it like to have to deal with the evil and stupid Republicans when you yourself are a super genius that everybody should bow down to and beg forgiveness from for just not being as awesome as you? That was 95% of mainstream journos for 8 years. It was embarrassing. It was debasing. I mean, just as a human being, to be so just to be always supplicating, to be so just toadies all the time. But anyway, you're going to see a lot of that if there is a Biden administration. And here's NBC reporter who's doing a great example of what you can expect for Biden. Same kind of treatment, play two.
Good to see you. I want to start with a question about your pandemic planning and then a question about your economic plan. You spoke about the need to access the outgoing administration's COVID vaccine distribution plans. What do you see as the biggest threat to your transition right now, given President Trump's unprecedented attempt to obstruct and delay a smooth transfer of power?
More people may die.
Isn't that amazing? Think about all the ways that he showed the editorial line that he's taking in that question, the unprecedented obstruction that's going on. What are the threats to you saving so many lives? Joe Biden is an imbecile. He is not a smart person. He does not have good judgment. He is not knowledgeable about anything that helps the public with the policies that he implements. I just want to scream. No one thinks this guy's impressive, but now they're all going to pretend like he is. Democrats, until 5 minutes ago, knew that he was a buffoon, but he'd been around forever. And, he was there to hold Obama's coat for 8 years. And now all of a sudden, we're supposed to think that he's the dear leader. Oh, he's amazing. He's going to save us. It wasn't that question. That question was perfect. Given how awful and horrible Trump is, what are you going to do to save more lives in the face of his efforts to kill more people because he's awful? Journos, baby. That's how they do it. That's how they get down. And Biden's really no better. I mean, Biden, of course, I love it. He goes, people will die. Yeah, sure. That's right. Everyone's going to die because Trump. I'm just going to tell you this. You know how the anti-war movement disappeared under Obama? I mean, there were a couple of, and hey, at least they're consistent. There were a couple of code pink crazy ladies running around occasionally during the Obama administration. They had no institutional support. The editorial page of the New York Times, CNN, nothing. People don't even know that Obama, just to look like he wasn't some wimp on national security who didn't know anything, surged over 100,000 troops in Afghanistan and announced a withdrawal at the same time of the surge. So the Taliban got to sit there and basically look at the calendars and look at the clocks and be like, okay, well, we fight this thing out for a while, but we keep some in reserve. We go across the border to Pakistan and we just wait it out. It's exactly what they did. But we lost particularly a lot of brave Marines during that period fighting. A childhood friend of mine was there in Helmand province. And I remember, we came back talking to him about this stuff. It was nasty fighting going on there. We lost a lot of Marines. Media didn't even talk about it. I mean, they covered a little, there's a little bit of a troop thing going on in Afghanistan, but we lost more soldiers in Afghanistan under Obama than we did under Bush. Does anyone even know that? Does anyone even understand that? No, of course not. Because the anti-war movement disappeared because the anti-war left is disingenuous. Right? They're really just a bunch of Marxists trying to undermine U.S. foreign policy abroad. If they had been consistent, I'd say, well, good for them, because I do think the Bush administration pushed for too much conflict in too many places. But for them, it's really just a tool. For the anti-war left, it's a tool of politics, the pretense that they care so much about our soldiers or they care about humanitarian losses in these countries. They really don't. It's about what works as a political instrument of bludgeoning the other side. And then when Obama's in office, oh, no, we got to back off this. And now Libyan war is fine. Now, whatever we got to do is fine. You're going to see the same thing with COVID. Be prepared for that. It's going to be disgusting. Do you think CNN's going to have a COVID death tracker up if Biden takes office? Every day, how many deaths, how many deaths, how many deaths? You think that's going to happen? Oh, want to make a prediction right now? All of a sudden, the deaths from COVID will just be a thing that happens. It's sad, but no, it's not any one person's fault, which is true, by the way. But that mentality has been completely in reverse now. It's all Trump's fault. Every death is Trump's fault. And they even go so far as to lie to you about the vaccines, mistrust in society. Here's Joe Biden himself saying it. Play clip 7.
It's important that people who are in the greatest need get it. I wouldn't hesitate to get the vaccine. But I also want to set an example. But I wouldn't hesitate to get the vaccine if, in fact, Dr. Fauci and these two organizations, whether it's Moderna or Pfizer, who have been extremely responsible, conclude that it is safe and able to be done. Look, the only reason people question the vaccine now is because of Donald Trump. That's the reason why people are questioning the vaccine, because all the things he says and doesn't say, whether is it truthful, is it not truthful, the exaggerations. I think we're on a clear path now. We're on a clear path where the international community and national leaders in the scientific community have focused on these two vaccines. They appear to be ready for prime time, ready to be used. And if that continues along those roads, I would take the vaccine.
The only reason that people distrust the vaccine is Donald Trump leaves out that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and other Democrats and the media became temporary and situational anti-vaxxers for months leading up to the election because they wanted people terrified, and anything, any lie, any tool, any artifice that they had to use to defeat Trump was okay, including spreading anti-vax nonsense, as if the Trump FDA would also be able to collude with Pfizer and Moderna to put out an unsafe or ineffective vaccine. You want to talk about a conspiracy. You want to talk about no evidence for something. But Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were the ones spreading that poison for months. And now they blame Trump for the poison that they spread. They created a perception among their followers who we're going to see again, who's the real cult? Is it the Democrats or Republicans? Trust me, it's Democrats. Remember the Obama era? They worshiped the guy. It was absurd. But the Democrats created the perception that you couldn't trust the Trump FDA. And now they're going to turn around and say, oh gosh, look at this. People don't trust Trump among our supporters in particular. We're going to have to clean up this mess. I mean, they're like the people that light a fire, that they're the ones that commit arson, and then they complain when the firefighters arrive, oh, you guys haven't put out that fire yet. Oh gosh, really not doing a good enough job here. They're the ones that started this. It's because of them. Do you think they'll ever admit that? No, never. Of course, that's completely absurd. They won't admit that. No, so much easier to just continue to play this game and lie to people. And one of the big lies is that Joe Biden represents some kind of new era of honor in our politics. Joe Biden is a slimy, feckless, reckless, self-interested DC swamp creature. That's just the truth. A quick note on these Georgia Senate runoffs. Who are Warnock and Ossoff, the two Democrat candidates here? What should we know about them? There's this plan that we're seeing underway right now where Californians are saying they're going to move to Georgia. I guess they're going to establish some form of residency there. They've got some way they think that they're going to be able to do this. They're looking to change their residences, move to Georgia, and vote in order to get these two Democrats elected. Let me say right now, friends, I've been advocating for this for a while. I want conservatives to pick a city. We should create a nationwide movement. Pick a city that we are going to take over politically. So whether it's Dallas or Tampa or you name it, we show up. It has to be in a red-ish state. We show up and we say, all right, I want, 300, 400,000 Republicans to all converge in this one place. And we're going to flip this city red and we're going to run it like a conservative city. I don't know what we call this project, but we need to do it. It needs to happen because right now we don't have any cities of any real size, which is unacceptable. But because also think about the example we could set. A city where police are supported, where public services are efficient, but also taxes are minimal. I mean, think about what we could do. Anyway, here's John Ossoff, supposed to be Mr. Nice Guy. He does remind me of that Obama-era Obamacare pajama boy meme. But here's John Ossoff, who the Maddow-watching, Chris Hayes-loving MSNBC squad, they think this guy's fantastic. I mean, if you're a leftist, they love Ossoff. Is he a nice guy? Running in Georgia for the Senate seat? Play 18.
We need to send a message this year. We need to send a message that if you indulge this kind of politics, you're not just going to get beaten. You're going to get beaten so bad you can never run or show your face again in public. Because we have had enough, absolutely enough, of what we are getting from Donald Trump and his fellow travelers right now.
Never show your face in public again for the crime of supporting Donald Trump. That's what they're telling us. They want to never show your face in public again. Oh, yeah, I can feel all the unity and the healing, can't you? And here's Democrat candidate Raphael Warnock, play 17.
No matter what happens next month, more than a third of the nation that would go along with this is reason to be afraid. America needs to repent for its worship of whiteness on full display.
Repent, America, for your worship of whiteness. These are the Democrat candidates here, Ossoff and Warnock. These are the things that they say. And they are the ones that the entire Democrat apparatus is going to go to extreme measures to do everything in their power to make sure that they win so that there can be a Democrat majority in the House, the Senate, and perhaps, yes, even the presidency in the hands of Joe Biden. That is a recipe for a 2021 that could be even worse, believe it or not, than 2020. I recently got a crash course in home title theft, and you better pray this crime never happens to you because it can ruin you financially. Here's how it works. The bad guys, they find your home's title. It exists online in the cloud. Then they use a quitclaim deed to kick you off, put themselves on, and take out loans against your home's equity. You often won't find out about this until you receive payment notices in the mail, perhaps even a foreclosure notice. You have to go with the experts I trust at Home Title Lock. They can create a virtual barrier around your home's title. And keep in mind, the usual identity theft services do not protect you. All you have to do is go to HomeTitleLock.com, use the promo code RADIO. That'll get you 30 free days of protection. You can also check online to see if you're a victim of this crime and don't even know it. That's HomeTitleLock.com, promo code RADIO for 30 free days of protection, and you can check to see if your home's title has already been breached, all free. HomeTitleLock.com, promo code RADIO. The fight is still on. This election is not yet over, despite what you're hearing in so many different places in the media. Let's hear from the campaign right now, an advisor to the campaign, senior strategic advisor, that is, our friend Steve Cortez, back in the mix. Steve, thanks for making the time for us.
I appreciate it, Buck, and you are very right. When I talk about this election, we must speak in the present tense because it is ongoing. Let's not be lulled into speaking in the past tense as though it is over.
Now, you've got a roughly 15,000, I think it's a little less than that, but roughly 15,000 vote margin of victory thus far. We could call it a margin of separation, perhaps, for Joe Biden in Georgia. We just found 2,600 new votes. Look at 2,600 votes, 2-for-1 going for Trump. Does this begin to chip away at the let's just move past this and not audit and not recheck and not recount anything, Steve?
Buck, it certainly does. Obviously, this is very troubling that these votes just happen to be missing and suddenly got found, and that they overwhelmingly favor the president. Forgive me if I'm not shocked. Right? Sort of like the police showing up in Casablanca and finding out while there's gambling going on at Rick's. And by the way, this statistical case also backs up this anecdotal case. When I mean the statistical case, I'm saying, for example, look at the state of Georgia and the rate of rejection of mailed-in ballots. 4 years ago, when they had about 200,000 mailed-in ballots in 2016, which is a more normal rate before the pandemic, they rejected 3% of all ballots that were mailed in. They were either not registered voters, there was something invalid about the ballot itself, it wasn't signed, whatever the reason, 3% were rejected. Now, this time, 1.3 million ballots in Georgia were mailed in, more than 6 times the 2016 total. That's not surprising, given the pandemic. However, here's what is surprising, and more than surprising, I think damning, really, of the vote totals and the validity of the vote totals. That rate of rejection went down from 3% all the way to 0.24% of ballots were rejected. In other words, 1/12 the level, the percentage of ballots that were rejected in 2016 were rejected this time, even though with such a mammoth increase, over 1.1 million more ballots coming in. If anything, if there were a serious vetting of the voting going on, we would expect, if anything, that percentage to actually rise, Buck, because you have so many people doing it for the first time. The fact is the percentage fell dramatically, and I believe the complete void of vetting of votes, and it wasn't contained to Georgia. Similar thing happened in Pennsylvania. As a matter of fact, the numbers are actually even more damning in Pennsylvania. This indicates that a large share of these votes are simply not valid. And the only way for us to determine if they are is a serious audit, not just a recount, not just sending them back to the machine, but an actual hand audit of these results. And in the case of Georgia, if we were to have the same rejection rate as 2016, 39,000 votes would be rejected instead of the only 3,000 that were.
Now, where are we with the recount in Georgia? The president's been tweeting about this. We know there was some kind of recount, but he's not happy with what's gone on. Can you just tell us, what is the status of Georgia as of today?
Right. Well, listen, the campaign is not happy with it, obviously, and neither is the president, because we're not having an honest recount there. And this is particularly disappointing because we have a supposedly Republican Secretary of State. Georgia, while it is a swing state, statewide has been electing Republicans lately, so we would expect better than this. But the unfortunate reality is we know that the recounts have not been, that it has been a recount rather than an auditing. And that's, again, a crucial difference here. We're not saying just put the numbers through the machine again. We realize that you're going to come up with a very similar number there. You're going to have a very tiny sampling of just honest human error. You'll change a few hundred votes. That's normal for a just quote recount. What we're talking about is an audit. And again, I think an audit for very legitimate means. I think the statistical case for the improbability of Joe Biden's win is really compelling. And one of the reasons, by the way, let me give you another stat related to Georgia. Let's give you some of the numbers. These Biden-only ballots nationwide, and what I mean by Biden-only is people who supposedly voted for Joe Biden and then for no one else down ticket. Now, that's a rare phenomenon. It certainly is rare even in 2020 outside of the swing states. However, there are a total of 450,000 at least of these Biden-only ballots in America. They are predominantly in these swing states, which seems far too convenient. And to get specific on Georgia, where we have very contentious Senate races, obviously both races are heading into runoff, but where you had highly contentious Senate races with a lot of interest in races, plural, because there's 2 of them, it's really telling that if you look at the Biden-only votes, there were 95,000 Biden-only ballots in the state of Georgia where somebody voted for Biden and then not down ballot, allegedly. If we compare that to Trump, no such phenomenon. Out of the 2.4 million votes that Donald Trump got, of those, only 818 people voted for Trump only, and then nobody down ballot. So I mean, think about that disparity. Fewer than 1,000 people voted for Trump only. 95,000 supposedly voted for Biden only. Look, it reeks. Let's just be honest about it. And again, in and of itself, I want to be fair, that is not conclusive in and of itself. It does not prove fraud, but it sure does smell bad, and it sure does point to a phenomenon that's pretty hard for any reasonable person to explain in the state of Georgia.
Now, we're speaking to Steve Cortes, senior strategic advisor to the Trump campaign. Steve, tell me this. Why haven't we, we've all these stories, all this sort of, the affidavits and all this about fraud, but I have not yet seen the here is proof of a fraud. We've seen proof of irregularity, no question about that, right? When you're finding ballots, when there's no there. And by the way, anyone who says there were not going to be at least irregularities in an election with 150 million, give or take, ballots cast, I mean, they're living in a fantasy world, right? So we know there are irregularities and that those should be corrected, and that means ballots are going to go one side or the other. Okay, fine. But intentional fraud, are we just, we have all these people saying, I saw this, I saw that. Are we really going to be able to prove any of this?
Buck, I believe we will. And here's what I would tell you. Those cases of what I would call micro fraud are important, a dead person voting, an illegal immigrant voting. But I'll be the first to concede that will not change the election. Now, we should clean that up, and people should be punished, and people should end up in handcuffs when they have broken election laws. That's serious. But I will agree with you that is not the smoking gun of macro fraud, right? The macro fraud that we're talking about, I think there are two instances here, both of which are still to be argued in federal court. So I would tell folks out there to hold tight, because these arguments had not even started yet. And there are really two elements to them. One is were hundreds of thousands of ballots illegally counted, meaning that there were no Republican observers, that there was no vetting, as I talked about, in terms of the percentages, insanely low percentages of rejection rates. And Rudy Giuliani, primarily in terms of the public face of the campaign, has been making this case that in Pennsylvania, there are as many as 600,000 plus ballots that are simply not valid, not according to our opinion of the Trump campaign, according to Pennsylvania law. So that's the macro case. And then the perhaps even more damning one, and Sidney Powell has really been the tip of the spear on this one, is the voting software. Now, she has said, and I think she has enormous credibility, she's one of the best lawyers in America. She certainly has a track record of meaning what she says publicly and eventually backing it with evidence. And I only say eventually because she simply does not want to make that evidence public yet, because it's about to be argued in court. But Sidney Powell has been very, very clear in her media appearances that she has absolute proof of cheating going on in a systemic way regarding Dominion software and perhaps other vote vendor companies that are out there, but primarily Dominion. And it really does, when I talk about the statistical improbability of the case, that alone does not prove that there was fraud, but it points us toward fraud, right? And I think a reasonable person says we're going to take the compelling circumstantial case and then take a more serious look at things that can actually be proven as fraudulent. So I am, like everybody else, awaiting those arguments to be made in court, but I'm very, very confident that Sidney Powell and others on the Trump legal team are going to make a compelling case that there wasn't just circumstantial fraud, evidence of fraud, but actual provable evidence. And I encourage everybody out there, encourage your audience to be patient in that regard. I mean, yes, we do have to move quickly, but we also can't build cases that are rock solid in a matter of hours. And so, we realize the clock is ticking. We realize December 8th and December 14th are critical deadlines for the Electoral College, and I can assure you everyone of the Trump campaign is working around the clock, but I can also assure you that the case has to be rock solid, the constitutional case. I believe eventually that several of these states, Pennsylvania included, will not be able to certify electors, and I believe we're going to be in for a contingent election, which is not the optimal choice, but it's also hardly without historical precedent, and it is something that is constitutionally and legally mandated in certain cases. I believe that's where we're going to end up, and I really believe that's how the president is going to end up with re-election.
So let's just, for everyone listening, and we're speaking to Steve Cortes, who's a senior strategic advisor to the Trump 2020 campaign. Steve, you're saying that these legal challenges may result in a situation where it comes down to not the Electoral College votes cast in the end, but it'll be the House of Representatives? Is that what you think may happen?
I believe so. Now, again, that's not official. I'm speaking as Steve Cortes.
Right, that's an analysis and projection, so everyone's
Correct.
clear. This is your assessment, but go ahead.
Correct. And of course, none of us know, right? But in my view, that is the most likely scenario, is that unfortunately, and it's the fault of the governors of some of these states, for example, Governor Wolf of Pennsylvania, who took it upon himself to unilaterally change the election procedures of his state, something he is not allowed to do by law nor by the U.S. Constitution, but he did it anyway. Unfortunately, his state Supreme Court backed him in that. But because of that unlawful act, he created a system where I believe it's going to be nearly impossible to certify the votes and to send proper electors to the United States Congress. Now, again, this has happened before historically, and we have procedures that trust the process. I mean, this has happened in America. It may happen again. We'll see. But that is my projection, but I think it's an educated one, is that it will be difficult for either side to reach 270 in terms of electoral votes. And if that happens, the vote then goes to the House of Representatives, where each state gets an equal vote. So Wyoming, our smallest state by population, gets one vote, as does California, our most populous. In that case, there are 26 delegations controlled by Republicans. If party lines hold, the president would then be re-elected president of the United States. Again, look, it's not optimal, but it's not unprecedented. And it's not a crisis. It doesn't mean that we can't go that route if we need to. But there's a lot of steps between here and there. And, all I'm saying, too, is that there are enough irregularities on an anecdotal basis. There is enough statistical evidence out there making a circumstantial case that we should doubt these returns. And then we're going to see about the legal case, the full legal case regarding wholesale macro fraud that the Trump campaign can make. And by the way, I'm not privy to that. No one is outside of that legal team, but we all will soon be privy to it in the country, and we will assess it as a country, as a people, and as will, most importantly, the courts, very likely the Supreme Court. And from there, I think we find out who's truly going to be president of the United States. But I would caution anybody who believes that there is a president-elect right now. There is not a president-elect.
Steve, can we hold you for 1 second? So I just want to give everybody a quick moment to catch their breath. I want to come back and ask you just a few questions about the Trump win among Latinos relative to where the GOP is. Can you give us a sec for that?
You bet.
All right, we got Steve Cortez. He is a senior strategic advisor to the Trump campaign. We'll be back with him in just a moment. Back with my friend Steve Cortez, senior strategic advisor to the Trump 2020 campaign. He's walked us through where we are now on these legal fights. Also made his own analytic assessment in the future, a prediction that this could, in fact, emphasis on could in fact go to the House of Representatives to determine who the next president will be. But Steve, I just want to ask you about the broader trend here of the incredible surge in Latino support relative to what the polls were saying and GOP expectations. Latino support for President Trump. Tell us about this.
Yes, listen, the president did incredibly well. This is super important to me as an Hispanic, and the whole team of the Trump campaign has been working for years, actually, since the president won in 2016, to build support, to reach out in respectful and intentional ways to the Hispanic community. If you contrast that, by the way, with our opponent, Joe Biden, his idea of Hispanic outreach was going to Florida and playing Despacito on his cell phone. I call that Hispandering, and it certainly didn't work, particularly in Florida. We won 47% of the Hispanic vote in Florida, and that's according to exit polling. I think we might have done even better than that, but regardless, I'll take 47%. It's part of why the president just romped in the state of Florida. It actually wasn't even close, defying all the skeptics and certainly all the fake news polling that was out there. On a national level, though, it's not just a Florida story. It's not just a Cuban and Venezuelan story. A lot of the media is trying to put it in a box and say, well, he just did really well among Cubans. That's not the case. For example, if we look at Texas, where there's very few Cubans, it's almost entirely a Mexican-American Hispanic population, of course, in border state of Texas. If we look at those border counties, it's really incredible the gains the president saw in those counties, which are overwhelmingly Hispanic. And I'll give you some of the numbers. Zapata County is 85% Hispanic, right on the U.S.-Mexico border. President Trump won it, and his margin versus his own margin in 2016 increased 38%. Right next to Zapata County is Starr County, 96% Hispanic. It's the most Hispanic county in America. The president didn't quite win it, but he only lost it by 5 points after losing it by 60 points in 2016. And you know, Buck is such an astute student of politics. Those kinds of swings just don't happen in 4 years, a 55% swing for the same candidate. But why did this happen? And I think this is really important, particularly when it comes to Texas. And I call it the 3 Gs. I think it was gas, guns, and God that brought Hispanics over to President Trump's side. What I mean by that is gas is the energy industry. It's critical for all Americans, of course, but particularly for the state of Texas, and a lot of Hispanics very directly involved in the energy industry. I think Hispanics rightly knew that Joe Biden would be an existential threat to America's energy dominance. That's terrible for the country, for Texas, and for a lot of Hispanics who work in those industries. When it comes to guns, the whole state of Texas has a great culture of the Second Amendment of self-reliance and self-protection. And there's a lot of good hombres in Texas with names like Cortez and Gomez who are not going to let a fake Mexican, Beto O'Rourke, be empowered by Joe Biden to take away their firearms. And then I think the last G that matters is God. Catholics are overwhelmingly church people, whether evangelical or Catholic. We do not want Joe Biden to be in the White House so that he can once again target religious groups like the wonderful women, the nuns of the Little Sisters of the Poor. It matters a lot to Hispanics. And so we saw a surge of Hispanic support for the America First agenda and for President Trump. It's one of the reasons, by the way, that I so doubt the election results as told to us by the corporate media. This president got the highest minority share overall in 60 years for any Republican candidate. I believe if you combine that with a net gain of 10 million votes over 2016, to me, it is the idea that we lost, frankly, is at least in a clean count of the legal votes. To me, that's a dubious case, but we've made great inroads with Hispanics, something to really build on from here.
Amazing as well, Steve, especially considering that one of the main lines of attack against this president was anti-Hispanic bias, right? That he was racist against Hispanics. This was apparently news, or I should say fake news, to millions of Hispanics across the country who, as you said, are traditional in a lot of their values, are entrepreneurs, are business people, and want a better, brighter future. They love this country. They're patriots. And they came out and they voted for Donald Trump. Thanks so much, Steve. Steve Cortez, advisor of the Trump campaign. Always great to have you on, buddy. Thanks for giving us your time today.
Thanks, Buck.